Afternoon. Welcome to Public Safety Committee meeting. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilor Allen to my left, Councilor Montreux, Madam President, Councilor Cardwell, Councilor Hogan, and Corporation Council. So we get going, could we just give a gist of what we are talking about here so members of the public can also get into the conversation?
Certainly.
Yes.
So as I'm sure everyone is familiar, prior to the state adopting the new cannabis law, all sales of marijuana products in the state were illegal. With the adoption of the new law, it decriminalizes certain distribution and sale of marijuana, but only in the event that the state issues you a license. And the licensure process is important because it helps to ensure that the products that are being sold are safe. Otherwise, you are in the same position you are now, where you have no idea the source of the product, where it was grown, what it contains, and how it will negatively impact the residents and the citizens of this city or anywhere in the state. So where we are now is we have a situation where the state has legalized, in certain instances, the distribution of marijuana and other cannabis-related products, but has not issued licenses yet to authorize businesses to operate. And so what is before you today is a tool for my office to be able to shut down unlicensed businesses. So this is a code enforcement issue for us and a public health and safety issue. So the general public does not necessarily know or understand that storefronts that are selling these products are not licensed, because the general public believes New York State made it legal, and so now it is safe for me to buy this product at this store. But that is not at all accurate, because none of those establishments have been properly licensed. So we have regular calls with OCM, which is the Office of Cannabis Management at the state level. We've explained to them the struggles that our community is having. I can confirm for you that communities all over the state are having the same issues and dealing with OCM and asking them for guidance. And what the response back from OCM has been is use whatever tools you can to control and moderate the use of the creation of these businesses through your code enforcement mechanisms. So I want to be clear, this is not a criminal issue. This is a code enforcement issue. These are businesses that are not legal to operate in our community or anywhere in the state for that matter. But our hands are tied because we don't right now have the ability to do anything about it on the civil side of things. So what is before you is a request from my office to allow me the ability to help enforce the state law by seeking injunctive relief from a court. So I can go into court and say, there's a business located at X, it is promoting and selling cannabis products, it is not licensed by the state of New York, and I'm asking authority of the court to have our code enforcement officer go in and shut that building down, that business, not the building.
Would you shut the entire business down, or just stop them from selling those particular products?
I don't want to speak for code enforcement, although Jake is here. I don't believe we have necessarily found an establishment that is legally selling potato chips and also selling cannabis-related products. So if you have a C of U to allow you to sell legal products, we would allow you to continue to sell those legal products. But to the extent you are also selling cannabis-related products, we would seek to shut that portion of the business down.
Most of the corner stores that I've been into, they are selling it. Like, it's right there at the on the counter.
Right.
So in that case, you would just tell them that they can no longer sell
Correct.
that, but they will still remain open and be able to sell everything
Milk,
else.
yes, the other products on the shelves, yes.
So how will codes know what weed is? Do you have like a testing kit, or how do you seize the products? What goes on?
So testing is an issue because of the way the cannabis law is written. It is very specific in terms of strains of marijuana. And so testing becomes an issue, but for us on the civil side, they are promoting these products. So we don't need to test. You don't have a C of U to distribute what you are promoting that you are distributing. So we will shut you down for those reasons.
So can I ask the question then? Because when you talk about not having a C of U and talk about them promoting that product and talking about not being able to test it, Spike looks like weed, and Spike can't be tested either. So why can't we go after those stores as well that's selling Spike over the counter?
We will do our best to go after everyone we can, including Spike, if we can identify it. But you're right, testing is an issue, which is a separate and distinct issue.
But it looks like weed.
But it looks like weed.
So confiscation would be part of this?
Confiscation will not be part of it because it implicates the Constitution and the illegal taking and possession of someone's property. That creates a whole different layer of issues and challenges for us. And so our goal is to shut these places down and to stop the distribution as quickly as we can so that we're protecting the safety of the residents.
What's prevent these vendors from going somewhere else?
Not one
and selling
thing,
the same
Councilor.
project?
That is exactly right. We have been chasing them already.
All over the second council district, as a matter of fact.
So Sue, can we,
City.
can we clarify? So we're mostly talking about the pop-up shops that are moving around the city selling predominantly mostly edible and also.
It is not just edibles. Yes, it includes edibles, and I will be honest with you, my office is working with the county health department to try to address those issues because edibles are a whole different level that the county health department is involved in with respect to monitoring those because they regulate food substantives. However, if someone was just selling weed, like you could walk in and you could buy a quantity of marijuana, you don't have a license to do that. So we would look to shut you down as well because I have no idea where it was grown. I don't know that it's safe. And most importantly, it is illegal. We should not lose any sight of the fact that it is illegal to distribute marijuana in New York State as we stand here today because no license has been issued. And the licensure process will necessarily entail safety steps along the way. They will ask you who is your supplier, where is it grown, what are the conditions under which it is grown. Those are the safety measures that the state has put in place before they issue a license so that our residents can be confident that when they walk into this store that has a proper license, that the product is being regulated at the state level.
So in the case of the, and this might be a question for Jake, so in the case of the ones that have already moved around, are we moving them or are they jumping ship before we get to them?
Well, we have tried, and Jake can answer the question. We have tried, but we don't have the ability to have a court order right now because of some constraints we have.
I may be able to address that issue because I want to address what Councilor Hogan said. The issue about them jumping around, we're not restricted to injunctive relief. The court please order them to shut down. We can also, if they violate that order, ask for a judgment of a civil penalty. I mean, that would follow them, that would follow the LLC, and if the LLC is thinly veiled, whoever's behind that LLC, we would seek a judgment against them. So it's not necessarily, yes, they could pop up someplace else, but there could be significant financial penalty to their actions. So regardless of where you pop up, the judgment would follow you in that sense.
If you can prove they're the same outfit, because they might, they're sure changers too.
And that would be our job to do, and we would be empowered to do that by seeking this special proceeding in court. So that would be just another tool in the tool set. It's not just closing down so they can open someplace else. It's also to seek penalty.
So one of my concerns, well, it's a couple of concerns, thank you for having this conversation, is how are we getting the information out to the community about what needs, like, people don't realize, you know, once they heard, oh, weed is legal, people are like, oh, it's legal, so it's just, you know, it's just this myth, but they don't understand the process. So making sure we get that information out to people, like, okay, yes, the state said this, but there's so many more layers that has to happen. And then the second is, how, do you have a list of, like, already places that you know you gotta go shut down?
Jake has a
You do?
list.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're well aware of where they are.
So just to clarify the shutdown, because I heard you say that if you are legal to sell potato chips, but not to sell marijuana, you can't seize the product and you're not gonna close them down entirely as a potato chip seller. So what does shutdown actually mean? Unless like a solely vape shop? Like,
Yeah, so I want to go backwards a little bit. So the main problem with a lot of these locations is they're not even legal to be retail anything. Okay, so you're taking a office storefront location and someone's moving in and selling cannabis products. We would do the same thing if they were selling potato chips. The problem and why we need this tool that we're presenting before you is because there's some inconsistencies with what's in the state law, and we need this at the local level to enforce this. You know, I'll give another good example. There's various locations we've already closed, and we've used the tool that they're not even legal to be retail anything. Take the cannabis part out of it. There's parking issues. There's safety concerns with fire safety and building code requirements within exiting, egress, emergency lighting, stuff like that, parking requirements. We are still enforcing all of that. Where we're running into some issues is when places are in locations that are lawful to have a retail storefront and addressing the actual sale of cannabis within. Now, to answer your question, if you have a certificate of use to be a corner food store and you're selling illegal cannabis, this would give us the ability to apply points to their business certificate of use as it would be a violation. So then we could close you based on that. So I think that answers your question.
Yes.
But this is much bigger than just the cannabis part of it. It's building code and zoning code requirements to be retail. And until the state comes out and says it's going to be anything different, we are treating these as mercantile building occupancy locations, the same as a corner store, food store, restaurant, not a restaurant, excuse me. So if they're not legal to be a mercantile space, that's one problem. If they are, they need to have a permit. Just because you can have mercantile at 123 Main Street doesn't mean you're legal yet. You have to apply to become that if it was something lawfully before. And all of that triggers review for everything within city government, between zoning and building code, fire code, etc. So this helps establish that process so we can regulate it. And this isn't a problem that's going to go away when licenses start to come out, because the gray market that exists today, because of the environment the state has put us in, and I'm going to call them out because OCM and the state are going to make millions of dollars off of this. And I implore all of you to reach out to the state level representatives, because we should get money for this enforcement, because we are going to be the ones that are going to be I never thought I'd be standing here having cannabis sales being one of my number one problems. I'm a little annoyed by it. The state has the money to give local cities and governments assistance in enforcement. We shouldn't have to do it alone. They need to help us.
That was my question, Jake. As we embark on something like this, what resources are available at our disposal to be able to make sure that something like this?
Well, none. Right now it's city government. We're on our own. It's myself, chief of police, fire chief working together to address these locations, but we need this tool. We need it so we can consistently enforce this citywide. It not only makes it safe on the products that they're buying, but it makes it safe on visiting that location. A lot of these businesses are cash businesses. They don't have proper security systems or personnel. There's robberies. It leads to other things like harassment and other criminal issues that arise.
To Jake's point, I mean, this is a serious problem in the western states, is that armed gangs are actually going into licensed establishments because you can't federally bank any of this money.
That's correct.
So I mean, this is could be a serious problem if something like this happens in this city. When they license these places, the cannabis that comes in these places, is it going to be like stamped, New York State approved cannabis or what? Because the situation is, I mean, with unstamped, like for instance, you can't sell unstamped cigarettes in any, and they can confiscate, state can confiscate them. Mm-hmm. Will they be able to confiscate unstamped marijuana?
So, Counselor, to answer some of those questions, so the state just within the past week or so.
Who are you? Can I ask?
Sure, Greg Fair, Assistant Corporation Counsel.
He's new.
Okay.
So yeah,
obviously,
be nice to him.
Yeah, met some of you, but yeah. So I apologize for not introducing myself. So the state just issued proposed regulations, long-awaited regulations, discussing some of the licenses, most of the licenses that are ultimately going to be issued under the statute. And these regulations spell out, answer a lot of the questions that we've had around things like security, product control, so cultivation, processing, all of these things. The state is micromanaging this stuff. The problem is that it's just taking them a long time to do it. So, there's a recognition from the state that these are cash, largely cash, based businesses. And so what will ultimately become final regulations are spelling out requirements for these new businesses and what they need to do to keep things safe, for everybody with regard to the product, with regard to, sales, employee safety. The state is controlling all of this. The problem is that there's an enforcement arm. The reason we're here today, there's an enforcement arm laid out under the statute from the state, the Cannabis Control Board, which is the sort of the top dog underneath the statute. The Cannabis Control Board has enforcement powers. They can refer things to the Attorney General. If there are unlicensed businesses operating, the Attorney General ultimately can bring civil actions against these businesses to shut them down. Same kind of thing that we're talking about here today: injunctions, civil penalties, that sort of thing. But the enforcement arm under the statute has been slow to emerge. We've been talking with the state, saying, hey, we need help with enforcement. And what they consistently do is sort of punt it back to us and say, well, right now we're doing everything we can. We're working on it. Our team is here. That's all we can tell you. But you guys need to use what you have at the local level to address this at this point. And we're doing everything we can to help you as well. And to date, what we know that they've done is they have sent out cease and desist letters to some businesses all over the state. They sent a batch in February. They sent a batch in July. But other than that, we don't know a whole lot about what they're doing, and that's by design. They're intentionally not really showing what they're doing behind the curtain, but they're
We're
working.
intentionally incompetent?
I'm not saying that, but
And you know
well,
what,
I just said it.
You
Yeah.
know what, Counselor, I want to jump in on that because I'm listening, and I think Counselor Hogan and we've been around the block for a while. The state constantly put constraints on the cities that they don't fund. So I'm sitting here listening to what Jake is saying. We already have a hard enough time trying to get our code enforcement done with our housing. So now you're telling me we have to do enforcement now with codes for the marijuana legislation. So I'm with Jake. I hope the state is listening, that they need to push back some resources when they push down all of these mandates, okay? Because they don't even, at this point, there's no clear-cut direction on what they're doing with marijuana. It was just, oh, it's legal, here you go. So that's really unfair.
We agree. But the way we view this is the state has told us,
This is what you have to do.
this is what you have to do, and the statute gives us, as a municipality, the authority to enforce. We need the local law to vest that with my office, and this is one more tool. So my office can assist Jake and take some of the burden off of him by going to the courts and saying, can I have injunctive relief, and can I get a judgment, and can I impose these fines, because this is an illegal business. And so we are just really here asking you to help us help Jake by giving us another tool in our tool belt while we work and wait on the state to get all their ducks in a row. And I think the other thing we are very cognizant of is there is a case out there, and my staff can speak to it more in depth if you want, but there's a case out there challenging the issuance of these licenses. And so currently there is a stay in effect. So even if the state was ready to issue, which I don't believe they are, the court has told them you can't issue until we run through the legal system on these challenges, which involve interstate commerce. And so we're going to be in this gray area for the foreseeable future. And we just want some more tools to be able to stop illegal businesses from operating in the city.
So can I ask you one more question though?
Sure.
So while we're at it, I get it with the marijuana. I know that we're going to try to shut down all the illegal operations, right? But let's be realistic, and I hope the state is listening again. Fentanyl, spike, those are 3-4 times as more dangerous. I mean, I understand when they put stuff in marijuana, But these drugs from the gate
Yes.
will kill you. And they're illegally being sold. So what do we have to put in place to try to stem some of that?
I'm concerned about that, serious, because that's what you see downtown. It's not the people on weed, it's the people that are spiked, they're losing their mind.
And fentanyl, both of those two.
Right, and I think, I'm happy to go and report back on whatever options we think we have. I think one of the issues with some of those drugs, as you indicated earlier, is a testing problem, that the mechanisms are either non-existent or cost prohibitive or not timely, in order to get that testing done, which makes immediate seizure a problem. I do believe that SPD is enforcing those types of sales when they find them and when they can. But I think these are just two different issues.
It is two different issues,
Right.
but right now, I think that if we start looking at things in the totality of it, we as a city, as a country, as a county, as whatever, if we start looking in totality, if we can figure out a way not to just go after the low-lying fruit, which is weed, okay? Let's talk about it all, because it cripples our medical emergency system when they're downtown scooping them up off the street because they done had some spike or fentanyl. I mean, we're not looking at the whole big picture, and it's really bad.
So I have a question. So let me paint a picture for a second. So if one pops up on Geddes Street tomorrow and we walk in the door and they find 5 pounds of flour and 600 bags of edibles,
Right, flour.
that's illegal on its own. So are we not going to seize that, or we do seize that?
No season.
My office does not have the ability to seize that. If SPD came upon an amount of marijuana that was in excess of what you are legally able to possess, and they had reason to believe that it was in fact that drug, I believe they would seize that as part of their investigation.
The allowable is 3
Ounces.
ounces, 24 grams. Right. So anything more than that.
Right,
Correct.
3 ounces.
Right, so
That
we're
is
supposed to get it
correct.
from
So
You
it's,
know, just
You can
just,
consume it so long as more than 21 years.
just so to President Hudson's point, I mean, there are two different things, but I've been in, there was a couple of these places in my council district. I've walked in. There are security guards, heavily armed security guards in there. They're selling all this stuff. It's a whole cash business.
Correct.
It is like a real issue, I think, everybody, you know, them not being able to bank their money into cash. Also, when we have a ABC license, a liquor authority license, it comes to the chief of police. The chief of police, all us counselors get a letter saying that all this has been submitted to the chief of police. Is that going to happen under this cannabis?
Yeah, it's going to be a very similar process where the municipality gets notification that a license is potentially going to be issued to somebody. It's the MRTA, which is the statute, is borrows heavily from the ABC law.
Will they have an input? The chief of police will say, hey, this
So
guy.
the city will have the opportunity to provide input about whether they think a license should ultimately be issued by the state or not.
But
Will
to
the
answer,
injunctive relief be on the property owner
yes,
or the leasing?
the property owner.
Good, excellent.
And to answer your question, like, no one in this room can stop the fact that this is a cash business. Until the federal government changes its regulations, this is a cash business.
We just want to mitigate the
It is not
issues.
illegal, exactly. So from my understanding of the research that my office has done, when the regulations by the state are finalized, they will include security measures that need to be complied with at these locations. But until that happens, these are the issues we are left trying to
And
address.
The difficult thing is that we're talking about unlicensed, so an unlicensed business, something that just pops up, they don't have to follow, they follow their own rules, they don't follow anybody's rules. But if a business gets a license from the state, which is what they're legally required to do to sell cannabis, they have to follow, again, this, 282-page document of proposed regulations that the state just issued. So the state is controlling ultimately will be controlling many of our concerns, but we're talking about unlicensed operators that are, the regulations don't control them. So we need a method to deal with that.
Suppose the city made an administrative decision to confiscate, what would happen? Who'd sue us?
Everyone.
I
Everyone?
was just thinking everybody.
Would we lose?
Everyone, yes.
We would. And what, First Amendment, what? What would we lose on?
It's a constitutional taking, so you've had no hearing, you've had no,
If they can prove they own it, right? They own the property.
I
Yes.
catch 22, right?
but you're talking about, and with all due respect to the council and this issue, you're talking about a drain on resources. That would be a drain on resources when I'm not sure that would be successful. If we can successfully get injunctive relief and fines to shut them down, which we cannot do right now, then we put ourselves in a position where it is possible that we lessen the number of these establishments that open. Right now, they know they can do it.
Right.
And they're just doing it, and they're making a ton of money doing it.
So, Council, I'm sorry, I'm asking questions that.
No, please do.
Just because I'm trying to understand this whole process. So you're saying we have nothing in place that can shut people down from selling weed, right? We have nothing in place that can shut people down from selling spike. And we have nothing in place that can shut people down for selling fentanyl. Well, we know these places have these things. I'm just trying to get it all in this head to figure this is what you're telling
So
me.
I think that we need to be clear that there are holes. It's like a sieve in terms of what our powers are. So Jake has certain powers where there is an establishment that has a C of U to sell mercantile, as Jake calls it. I call it food products, he calls it mercantile. But that same establishment is selling something that the C of U doesn't cover. So Jake can cite them, it's a code violation, he can cite them, but it's not necessarily clear that he can shut them down on that basis. This tool gives us more power to actually shut them down. Then we have another situation where this same establishment is located in a place that is not set up for retail sales at all. It doesn't comply. That's a whole different situation. He has more power there to shut them down because that's just, you just don't have a permit to be there. You can't be there, it's illegal. With respect to the fentanyl and the spike and those types of things, I think that is a different issue in terms of, yes, certainly there are criminal aspects of that can come into play, and police can arrest people. They can confiscate that material as part of an arrest. I think the issue there becomes a testing issue. And I think that handcuffs the police in many instances, especially with respect to spike. I think every single time you get a test that accounts for this, they change a molecule in it so that now it doesn't react to this test. So I can't prove that it is spike. So it's a multifaceted problem that spans all of these different drugs and all of these different departments and our entire city. So I know it seems like we're coming to you with this little teeny tiny nugget in this whole grain, one grain of sand on an entire beach. But for my office, everything we can do, even if it's a little tiny change, helps us to help Jake and to try to find ways to combat this when truly we are being handcuffed at so many levels that we don't control. So the fact that the legality of marijuana got out ahead of regulations,
Ridiculous.
that we don't control that, but we are left here in a situation where, to your point, Counselor, the general public, all they heard was marijuana's legal.
Yep.
Yeah,
And that's what they think.
And that's what they think, exactly.
So we have to be better educated.
Correct. So the people who go to these establishments believe that they are acting within the law.
Yeah.
And I believe also that they trust that the product that they're getting is regulated. The fact is, it is not regulated
So-
because the licenses don't exist.
To your point about testing and also about mercantile, Jake, don't go anywhere. How does Jake know when his great team goes into a store and sees a little packet with a weed symbol on it and goes to the counter and says, this is illegal weed, we're shutting this part of your business down, and the owner says, that's not weed, that's tea.
Or that spike.
How do you, or whatever else is in it, but they say, no, that is mercantile, and that does fall under our food business. People take that and they go home and they eat it. Like, where is your defense with that?
So I would just make 2 points. If I could address just briefly, Counselor, your concern. We're here today, and I completely understand and commiserate with you in the community about the plague of opioids and fentanyl and everything. This is because marijuana is actually legal in certain amounts. That's, I think, the problem. And then what we're trying to do is deal with a situation where there's not something that's necessarily not criminal, but it's not legal for them to sell it. And so we're trying to regulate, so to speak, where there's the lack of a presence of regulation, right? With respect to your question about the burden, this isn't a criminal court where you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what I'm dealing with here is specifically marijuana. It's by just a preponderance of the evidence, so 50% plus one. If you are showing yourself out to the community that you are saying, I am selling, indica lollipops, it says indica lollipops, there's no question what you're trying to sell to the community. So I don't want to get too much into what our process would be, because I would say that's a little bit more attorney-client as far as how we're going to investigate this, and how we would proceed. But our standard for proof is not what it would be in a criminal court.
Okay. And one other thing too, I heard you say that there could be a civil penalty that's assessed, right? And then also points on the C of U. So how many points does it take to shut somebody totally down? And how many points will they get hit with when you find them with the little packets?
That is something we'll have to talk with the law department on, but typically it's 3 to 4 points per incident. And if you reach a certain number of points within 12 or 18 months, we can close you. Typically the trigger is 12 points. So, a couple different incidents and we could move to shut you down.
Okay. And then the last point is we had a council meeting earlier this year with OCM, Cannabis Management Office out of the state, and we asked pretty much all of these questions. And they basically said that, we're not there yet, but if you want to report any of these illegal sales, you can email us, enforcement@ocm.gov. That was the only tool they had to report, and there was no testing with that either. So is that still in place? Because what they said they would do is enforce. If we got a complaint about a place, we would put them on the list. So when they go to apply to be legal someday, that would be a negative on the record. So is that still happening?
Yes, thanks, Counselor. Yes, that is still happening, and I'll say, unfortunately, that is still the only advice we're getting, other than OCM telling us to use our local tools.
Right.
From a legal standpoint, that's the only other thing that we can do at this point is send an email to an email address. About locations that we know about that are holding themselves out as businesses selling cannabis.
So how about one more thing we do is like a poster campaign where we go to every
They don't have an
establishment,
upstate
good or bad,
representative.
even Wegmans, and say, hey, listen, there's 3 parts of this marijuana is legal that you should know as a business owner. 1, you could get a civil penalty if we find that you're selling these products. 2, points on your CFU. We can shut your whole establishment down. No more potato chip sales for you. And also, we're going to report you to the state. And when they get that report, you're going to get a ding so that you will never be able to get. Like those 3 points, keep it simple. That could also educate the public too. So at least they know when they go into, Grandma Mary's store to buy it, they say, oh, you can get, wait, what? And then over time, hopefully they'll start to get it. But,
Grandma Mary might follow it, but the West Side Market certainly won't.
Absolutely
but at
won't.
least it's there and it's something that we can point to.
We have to
So-
educate the general community, and just to, okay, is there still not a representative from upstate New York?
There isn't.
Syracuse on
Nope.
committee?
Nope.
'Cause before
Which is
this
what we
all got-
propose, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Nope.
So, to your point, Counselor, if OCM gets a notice that you are illegally distributing, which would be everybody who is distributing at the moment, allegedly, you will immediately not be entitled to a license when that process opens up. What I'm about to say is an assumption on my part.
Yeah.
I assume none of these shops care because
They
they're
don't.
making hay while the
They
sun is
don't.
shining right now, and they're making a lot of money without following any regulations. And so that threat is empty to them. They
It
don't
is.
care.
And
And
they
how
don't
about
wanna
the
go through the process.
They don't want to, right? It's a lot of money. It's a
Right.
lot of money to get a license, and it's a lot of regulations to follow. So they're taking advantage of this sweet spot, if you will,
Sure.
between when it was announced that it's legal and when it really becomes legal to
Yep.
distribute. And they're going to make their money now, and they don't care.
But I do think it's a step in the right direction, at least trying to hold the state accountable, that the city of Syracuse has been reporting these illegal places.
Yes, and we
you
continue
said
to.
that that's going to matter. So when it comes time to apply for a license to be a legit establishment, and they're still not doing it, we go back to the state and say, now what? You said that this was going to be
Right.
the right thing to do, and it still has no muscle.
Right.
Todd, can I ask you a question? You talked about fines. Do you have any idea what the fines would be and where they would start?
Not at this point, no. We don't have the fines actually built into the particular ordinance itself. We could ask the court for what we deem appropriate. A lot of times it has to do whether or not they don't follow the court order, and we go back and we say they violate, we want you to hold them in contempt. And then the court can assess whether we want to hold them in contempt for the amount of resources that the city has put into trying to shut you down, or the amount of we want to fine you to send a message. The court has the discretion to do that.
Okay, because I think it's deeper than a message, because I know the one that you did shut down or move out or relocate. They were right in front of a school bus stop where the kids were getting off the bus. And I think if you're in a school zone, you should be deemed even harder.
Well, that would go into our papers, right? We would indicate that they're selling this right, in front of school children, et cetera, and the court would consider that in whatever punitive measure it would want to take by giving a fine of what you would call criminal contempt if they don't follow the order.
So two other things to add to this that I would just want to put out there is OCM is really not designed to regulate illegal establishments. It's the same as the liquor authority, unfortunately. They really are only going to manage applicants that either have a license or pending license. It's the same with these illegal nightclubs that pop up. These are illegal bars, and SLA doesn't want anything to do with it. OCM's pretty much the same way, unfortunately. This is falling on us. This is why this tool is important. And to Todd's point, this is more than just the business proprietor. Everyone I've dealt with, they're not the building owner in these locations. Shame on the building owners too for allowing these businesses to exist unlawfully, because they're making money off of it too. And with these injunctions, I believe we could go after a building owner, a business owner, both.
We would go after the building owner because that's who owns the real property where the establishment is taking place.
But I also think a business owner too, because what's to prevent them from just jumping across the street to the next building? I mean, that's really who did the corruption, so they should have a ding on their.
So Jake, from a safety perspective, because, we are talking about selling and you coming down and telling them you can't, can't do this. From a safety perspective, do you think this is a good idea on your part, or should this be on the police?
Are you afraid with your team going into a store to tell them stop selling that illegal drug with the armed guy at the door? I would be.
But they're not gonna go into the store.
Right.
We haven't met many of Jake's guys. I don't think they're scared of anything.
I mean, I don't just walk in by myself. I mean, we work with the police department, fire department. We go on these trips together. We've done many of these already. There's been zero problems. A lot of it comes down to regulation. It's not, we just want people to work within the legalities of it. You don't have a license, you need to close. There's a big misconception out there, and this misconception that it's allowed, and the state's allowed way too much wiggle room or gray area for them to operate in for too long, and it strains resources. I could sit here all day, and they need to provide resources.
We get you, because we know what we're going through to try to do the enforcement of the houses, so we get it.
My other question is to Sue and Todd. In terms of the meaning and the power, what we are trying to do, without explicit fines and without an explicit repercussion, what would make anybody even comply, knowing that they don't know what this is going to cause?
So,
at all.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
cut
no,
you
go
off.
ahead,
But
please.
so under the charter, we have the ability to impose up to $10,000 in penalties for various things. So Todd could tell me, and I'm sure he will educate me on why I'm wrong on this, but my recommendation would be when we go into court to seek injunctive relief, we ask for the penalty to be imposed. So depending on the severity of any one given case, we would ask for penalties up to $10,000 against these establishments.
So this would be up to the discretion of the lawyer at that moment to figure out that with the judge? Right.
Well, it would be up to the discretion of my office to put the request in the motion papers. Ultimately, we live at the discretion of the court. So ultimately, the court has the final say on what will be authorized, but it is the discretion of my office to say, here's what we're going to ask for. And So I think to the extent we get to a point where my office has to bring a motion to the court, that means Jake has gone out and tried to address it nicely. He's gone out and said, look, you guys, this is an illegal business, I need you to shut down. Or you're not in compliance with your C of U, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. If those measures don't work, then it comes to me, and I say, okay, we're gonna file an order to show cause, we're gonna bring this special proceeding, we're looking for injunctive relief to shut you down. In my mind, sitting here today, I can't imagine not asking for the maximum penalty in each of those cases.
What's the time frame, though? When you go and do that, what's the time frame? A month, 2 months, 3 months? What's the time frame?
Oh, no, we would, an order to show cause is an expedited motion where we would ask the court for immediate relief. So we would say, within 36 hours, we need to know. And so it makes it quicker. I'm not telling you in every case I'll have an answer in 36 hours, but it is not months, it is maybe weeks.
And, I'm sorry, Counselor, and I would add that if they are not in compliance with that order, then the court, we go back to the court and say, hold them in contempt, hold the building owner in contempt, hold the business in contempt, they are continue to violate, and the court could really slap them with some serious penalties that can include, and I don't, jail time potentially, so.
So let me just,
Above and beyond.
let me ask the question before Councilor Caldwell go in. So, help me understand this. I know we have different branches of what we do with the courts, okay? And I know that when we talk about housing, it goes like a snail. But with this would be expedited. So this wouldn't be the slow snail pace.
That is correct, because this is an illegal business that has negative impacts on the immediate health and safety of our residents or the people buying this product. So there are times when the court will allow you to move by a special motion that expedites things. Dispossessing someone of real estate is not one of those times.
And I would just note that unlike housing, we're not giving them an opportunity to correct, right? It's not as if, you have a leaky roof, we'll give you an additional.
No, but I was just curious because I know every time we talk about different things, the courts are behind, the courts are behind, the courts are behind. So what would make the courts not be behind in this particular case?
They have they have a special process by which they assign emergency motions. And an order to show cause is code word for an emergency motion. It means I need help now. I can't wait the normal, we'll assign it to a judge and he'll set up a scheduling order and we'll have a call and it'll be 30 days from now before you talk to anybody. This is a signal and a method under law to allow us to go in and say, we have an emergent need, so we need immediate redress. And they assign it to a specific, a judge who has his or her job is to address emergency motions.
So, thank you for that answer part of my question. The other part is sort of twofold here with both of you guys. So, when it comes to, a lot of the selling of these illegals are in these pockets of neighborhoods, period. We're just going to keep it 100%. Do we have any certificate of, like, when these businesses are opening? What is the procedure that we go through as a city when their business opens, a corner store opens, like certificate of occupancy? What are they saying they are? And do we have any kind of guidelines that prohibits certain things? Because if you, I'll be honest, in certain parts on the north side, for instance, I went and I'm frustrated in many ways of how our community looks on the north side because we could do better with that. But the corner stores, like every 5 steps is like a corner store. So I'm asking for the question is, how are we, like, is there anything that as a city do we have, like, okay, when someone opens up a store, what do they register with? Are we checking it? Is there anything against every 5 blocks? There's something there, like, I'm just trying to, that would sort of eliminate some of the other issues.
Understood. I share your frustration. I guess I'll start with, these illegal cannabis locations are not just in certain neighborhoods. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Every side of the city has them. University.
Yeah, no, they are. But I mean, just,
near
I'm not talking about cannabis, I'm just talking about the illegal drugs, period.
So the corner store thing is a whole nother issue, I guess is what I would call it. But the majority of them operate within the legal bounds of the city. Like they're either zoned that way and they can operate, they get their certificates. People keep going to them. I mean, constituents support them. They wouldn't stay open if they weren't selling anything. Yeah, you drive up Park Street, there's 3 of them within 500 feet. Why do people shop there? I don't know. But they're legal. They can lawfully exist there.
Place they have to shop.
You know, so that's something that maybe,
So the city doesn't have.
there's no regulations of you can't have like 2 corner stores at an intersection. There's nothing that exists
There's no
for that.
regulation, period, right? Because I know when I first started, I wanted us to give them closing hours, and I was told, oh, you can't do that, that's the state, so.
Well, the good news is rezone does have some new terms for corner stores, opening new ones. They're gonna require a public hearing like they do with planning commission, all of that. So currently, if there's, you know, in the zoning ordinance, it's on the corner of, let's just say Grant Boulevard in Darlington, they were zoned for a restaurant or a store. According to this current ordinance, they can just open it up. But with the new rezone, they're proposing that a public hearing be had and that
Which
they really
should.
consider all the other corner stores and if
should.
this is need. So that's a good thing coming.
That's what
But I'm glad you brought up zoning too, because I have this report from the Auburn Common Council, and I don't know, is your group aware of the work that they have done? The Auburn Common Council on October 7th, they actually changed a bunch of their zoning ordinances. I know that's no small task here in Syracuse. In any process, it takes a long time. But some of the things they do really well is they talked about proximity to other smoke shops or places that sell. So can't be within 1,000 feet of each other, can't be within 300 feet of a single family or 2-family or a townhouse residence, or 200 feet near a church. I mean, that's amazing, because how many would that compromise right now? Now, granted, we would have to grandfather, but these are some things that we should consider going forward. And also, maybe codes and zoning could step up with this too, quicker than not. Attention-getting devices, including but not limited to LED flashing signs, flags, banners, which I know currently our zoning ordinance does, you know,
We have 1,000
oversee banners and feather signs and things like that. But if we can really make this focus on smoke and vape shops, especially new ones, they actually put a moratorium for 6 months. Any new smoke shop that wants to open, Auburn says, you gotta wait 6 months because we're trying to figure out the laws. So maybe we could do something like what they've done, because I think that these are good steps.
So I will say that my team, we have a team in my office that's working with other factions of City Hall, and we are working closely with other municipalities, Rochester, other cities, to find out how they're addressing this. Because in some ways, only recently did we get direction from the state that said how we could start to regulate, let alone what those specific rules are. And as you pointed out, any regulations will have to be incorporated into our new zoning structure.
We can tweak it now, though. We don't have to wait until rezone is
Well,
approved.
if you, that's a whole different discussion.
It is.
But tweaking it now means you tweak the old one, and you have to go through seeker on tweaking the old one, and then you would have to do it again when you adopted your new one, because it's not included in your new one.
Correct.
So it's not that it can't happen, it's
Yep.
just very time consuming. And we don't have all the information we need yet from the state. So we're playing this chicken and egg kind of thing with the zoning, but we are tracking carefully other municipalities and what regulations, and I don't even want to call them regulations, what guidance the state has given us to date relative to how we will be able to regulate them in our zoning code.
So I urge you to look at the
Thank
Auburn
you.
Common Council.
Greg may
because,
have that one because we have others.
Yeah, and
And when was that passed, that
October 7th,
October 7th, so it
believe.
probably hasn't been challenged.
and that was
Right.
maybe, yeah. And that was really the reason, because I've been watching the council in Auburn doing this, so that's why I asked that the council meet with OCM and had really high hopes that they would have more information.
Many of us have been here for a while, and
didn't, so.
you know, if the planning commission comes up, well, you know, there'll be a bunch of neighbors will get a hold of us.
Yeah.
People, they'll wanna go start a store. People will talk against it, planning commission will pass it, come to common council. The only thing we can deal with, of course, is a special permit, you know, and that's about it. You know, and there's been stores in this city that have decided not to sell alcohol because they sell other stuff. You know, we've
Or the one with the sliding door?
and the West Side Family
I
Market,
used to get
how
hot.
long have you been in court with that?
Months.
Months, almost over a year anyways, you know, for nuisance abatement, so.
And Jake, how long did it take us to seal up the little door they used to push out?
So again, you know, I appreciate everything you do and all the struggles you have. I appreciate that what we're asking for today, again, is one grain of salt in, you know, a host of issues. But getting this for us helps us start to enforce what the state has not otherwise been able to regulate and which is not currently legal. And so we're just asking for consideration of that tool so we have it and we can help support Jake and his team.
So just to ask a much more general question in regards to the history of drug laws and what they have become and the group that they have impacted. So as a city that somewhat is within that boundaries of historical legal laws, right? How do we explain this to our resident that this is not another 2.0 drugs attack regulation on people?
So I would note first that we're not criminalizing through this process. This is a civil process to make sure that people understand that they would have to follow the state's regulatory structure if they want to be a legal establishment that's selling safe, legal marijuana to a consuming public that can do so safely, concerning all the public health issues, et cetera. Greg, I had spoken with earlier, had a very good point as to the state's position with respect to the racial and social equity issues as far as the licensing process with the state. And so one of the issues, if you allow people to essentially not get in line, essentially, I'm just going to open up my own place, it floods out the people who were allowed to be towards the front of the line to get licenses, were given priorities because of previous marijuana convictions, et cetera, are now in the front of the line, and they're going to be losing business because they followed the process to get that priority. And Greg, if you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, so a huge component of what New York State is doing, and it's in to its credit, and it's different from other states that have legalized, is that they're prioritizing social equity goals and social justice, righting some of the wrongs of the past. And they're doing that. So the very first approximately 150 licenses they're going to issue are going to people that either have some sort of prior marijuana conviction or a family member that had a conviction. It's a really important tenet of the law that's being passed here to right the wrongs of the past. So the issue here is that the people that are paying application fees to go through this process with the state to do it legally and get a license, that whole thing is being undermined or undercut by this gray market, these illegal operators who say, I'm not going to wait in line, I'm just going to do what I want. So righting the wrongs of the past, it's being hindered by this gray market. The whole sort of purpose of the statute, one of the tenets of the statute, the social equity component, people that are waiting in line for a license, their business is being harmed by the gray market.
So Greg, can I ask you a question? Because I hear what you're saying, because I know when they first started talking about legalizing it, they talked about the inequities of the people that have been incarcerated, whatever. But the way I'm seeing the way the state is distributing these licenses is still not done equitably. There's nothing upstate. Everything they pushed out has been pushed that way. So when is the equity going to start?
So I could, it's a good question, Counselor. I can speak to maybe part of that. So Sue mentioned earlier the federal lawsuit that's ongoing right now. So without getting too much into the weeds, the issuance of licenses here in Syracuse, Central New York, has been put on hold because of that lawsuit. There are 5 places statewide where licenses right now cannot be issued by the state. Central New York, Western New York, the Finger Lakes, Hudson region, and Brooklyn. So until further notice, until that issue is resolved, the legal issue is resolved in federal court, the state can't issue licenses here, which is another problem. I think it ties into what we're here for today. This gray market is going to you know, it's going to be here for a long time because the legal market can't even happen until the federal lawsuit's resolved. And then once it is and the licenses are issued, we're still going to have a great, you know, there's still.
But just those 5 areas, but everybody else in the state.
So, because
they
they're
can-
not impacted by the lawsuit, but there's, you know, eventually, you know, there could be lawsuits that impact other parts of the state, but that's why you saw a handful, they're getting ready to be issued.
And they can continue to
Not
keep
here.
doing that, right?
Unless there's some, you know,
Wow.
unless there's a legal reason, another lawsuit or something, parts of the state can get licenses at this
Okay,
point.
so we can.
So you wanted to add something?
I just want to make sure that, for my own peace of mind, I want to be clear that nothing that my office is seeking to get authority to do impacts the buyer, right? Like, the person who's going into these shops, that's not what this is.
Right.
We're not targeting those individuals.
Right.
We are concerned for those individuals because
Sure.
we think they assume it's legal. But that is not who we are targeting. We are only targeting the unlicensed business and the owner of the property that houses that business. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
And if, just for people who might not be aware, because some of the neighborhoods I represent, including my own where I live, when these places open up, it isn't just 1 or 2 people walking in every 10 minutes.
Oh
It's
my
2,000 or 3,000 people all of a sudden descending on a neighborhood, parking all over the place, creating all sorts of havoc. And a lot of times, like a commercial area, like particularly on the end of Lowell Avenue.
That's a great point. These aren't just storefronts. There are pop-up events. They'll be, most of them are on weekends, but they're farmers markets or hey, I rented this huge building. You want to be a vendor? You pay me this money. You come to my event. So it's not just storefronts. It includes what Councilor Hogan mentioned, and we can use this tool for those folks as well.
Right.
One last question. Is SPD involved, obviously, with this work? And
SPD is involved with Jake in terms of going to locations when he feels he needs that type of backup, but this is a civil proceeding. It is not a criminal matter. So I don't need to work with SPD to enforce and take the action that we're asking for authority to do. It is a civil remedy.
right, it is civil, but I mean, they're obviously frontline, and everyone thinks the police have magic wand to fix everything, right? So just bringing them in to hear about it, obviously listening to because they might have some magic that you don't know about.
Yes.
And even with civil proceedings, obviously, I just had a police officer help, 2 roommates that were fighting. So that ended up in an arrest, and that arrest is gonna go to civil court. Of course, that's civil, not criminal. So I just really am an advocate for talking and bringing
We
everyone
are in
together.
regular communication with SPD on the cannabis law, what's happening in the courts, what our office is doing, and of course, through Jake. So it's
Right.
not that we are not
Right.
working with them, it's just whether or not we need them to actually bring this action.
Just to even, make them aware, and they
Absolutely.
might have some other issues that they've confronted that could be part of this, that,
Yes, absolutely.
anyway, okay, rant over, thanks.
So Todd, just out of curiosity, what's the cost of a license do you know?
That's a better question for Greg, and I understand it not to be cheap.
I don't have all the figures in terms of the various application fees, but I know off the top of my head that it starts at $1,000 just to
And that's,
start the application process with the state. Well, it's not cheap. I don't have a precise figure for you. but
somebody I know that applied said it was 100,000,
Yeah, I think it's-
non-refundable.
Oh, okay. So the reason I'm asking that,
Yeah.
is you talk about equity and social justice, and if you are looking at the population that they are prioritizing, I don't think they have $100,000
Yeah,
for those, which I don't know if that's really a remedy in a sense.
Yeah, well, I guess that's more of a state issue in terms of what they're charging.
That's why they
for
carved
people
it
to-
out for the people that have been affected by
I agree.
criminalization.
I think there's different fees depending on the type of license
okay.
that you are being awarded.
Okay. Other
Before we
questions?
end, nope, just want to make a quick comment. Thank you for taking this time out to explain. I just want to make sure that, as we go ahead and move forward, that we make sure the community is educated behind this, because they do not know. I'm telling you, and I've been to, establishments who are very big, and they, they have pop-up shops, though they didn't know. And then my last statement, because I just want to make sure that the community knows, the state knows, whoever needs to know, that we have to push the same energy for this fentanyl and this spike. Spike and fentanyl are killing our babies in our
Absolutely.
community. people are walking around in zombies, they're falling out, and narcotics not, bringing everybody back. I'm not hearing people fall out from weed, but they are definitely dying from spiking and fentanyl. So I'm urging, and I'm saying it because this is the platform we can say it, we have to do something about that because it's killing our people. So thank you for this, though.
Thank you, Counselor. And
Other questions?
I just want to offer to the council, if it's something you'd want, my office can put together a bullet point cheat sheet, if you will, that you can use when you're talking to constituents to let them know.
Could you, please?
Yeah, we will be happy to do that. And
I'm making posters, and I'm going to share them with you after. One poster is to anyone who wants to sell or plans to sell marijuana in Syracuse, New York. And another one is anyone who wants to buy it in Syracuse, New York. And those warnings will just be very careful. This is not legal to sell, so we don't know what you're getting, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
So can I ask
Well,
one
education,
quick question?
Councilor
Is there any way, and maybe this is better asked, I'd probably be better asked to somebody in the medical community, because I really want to know the numbers of pickups through AMR that were transported to upstate from this spike epidemic. I really would like to know the cost of it. Who would I ask?
maybe Chief Mons might have some information
Or maybe
relative to
upstate
that,
too,
or
huh? Or
one of the
AMR.
hospitals, AMR, or one of the emergency rooms.
So if they looking and listening, maybe they can give me a holler.
Right.
Let me know. I want to know the cost.
Thank you.
Well, I want to
Thank
thank
you.
all my colleagues and
We're all here
Corporation
too, huh?
Council
Almost.
and all the public that are
And
listening.
Rita.
Thank you so much, and that will
were
conclude
almost all
our
here.
meeting.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.